watching companies really strive for new opportunities, while at the same time trying to work out how to minimise their exposure to risk, has been an absolutely fascinating picture to watch.
Hello Ian, welcome.
Hi.
Good to see you again after the recent Economist Risk Summit. That was a really excellent event and I'm really pleased to take part in that.
Thanks.
You've recently undertaken a report looking at a long-term view of risk. ACCA was very happy to sponsor that. We're delighted with the results as well. Can you give us a little overview of what the report set out to do?
Absolutely. We at the Economist Intelligence Unit have looked at risk as an issue across business for many years now. We've gradually worked ourselves into a position where we've been trying to establish just how integrated the risk function is within organisations. It's been absolutely fascinating to watch over the last couple of years because, of course, we're all coming out of a downturn, we're living in a very volatile period, and watching companies really strive for new opportunities while at the same time trying to work out how to minimise their exposure to risk has been an absolutely fascinating picture to watch. So this year we thought to ourselves, well, what's been apparent as a result of the downturn is that there needs to be a lot more focus on long-term thinking across companies' business strategy, and equally we decided amongst ourselves that there ought to be more long-term thinking across the way they're looking at risk as well. So this is the principle we set out to look at in this year's research. We call it the long view because that's what we went to look at. And yes, that was our starting point.
It's a massive challenge for businesses to be able to see that long-term perspective and then actually build it back into their business model. How did you actually undertake the survey? Who did you ask to respond?
We've got a very large survey panel at The Economist who opt in to do different surveys for us, which is great because it lets us sort of slice and dice different demographics. Yeah. In the past, what we've done with these pieces of research is we've generally only surveyed the risk function with the organisations. But lately we've decided, the last few years, we've decided that it would be an interesting exercise to not just interview the risk function, but also the C-suite and ask them and find out whether there are differences in opinion between them. So that is effectively the survey cohort that we addressed this year. We sought 500 respondents from around the world, roughly a third between North America, Western Europe and the Asia Pacific, and addressed the questions that way. They sent us sort of a series of questions and of course then we analysed the results.
What was the real crucial proposition you took to them?
Crucial proposition this year was whether or not long-term thinking on risk is being applied by their organisations, and we did that with, for example, we asked whether or not it was important to them to take a long view, and as you'd expect, the answer comes back, well, yes, it's very important. Do you do enough of it? Well, no, we don't. And what are the barriers to that? Are the next series of questions. So that's was the main focus of the first part of the survey.
You came up with some really clear indications that yes, there is a long-term view, but it seems that it's maybe not being embedded back into the business. What were the most crucial elements of the results for you?
Well, I think one of the most striking findings was the fact that one of the key barriers to long-term thinking with the organisations is the fact that there's well, we're still not seeing much more longevity in a CEO's lifespan than we ever used to. It's now about 6 years on average. So if you're asking an organisation to take a view 10 years or 15 years ahead, and a CEO is only going to be there for 4 or 6 or 7 years, then there's obviously a bit of a mismatch there, and that's clearly identified by respondents to our survey as something which it's a barrier to implementing long-term risk into long-term thinking. On the other hand, they seem quite comfortable with the main responsibility for long-term thinking on risk to belong with the CEO and the board. So it's obviously their responsibility by a clear majority of respondents, and yet it's also seen that the short-term of their term, if you like, is seen as a barrier to this being implemented.
I mean, that ownership of that strategic planning exercise by the C-suite is really vital because it gives it power, it gives it some real foundation. The question is for businesses, how do you actually use that information? You've got a clear idea of some systemic future risks, you've undertaken those scenario plans, you know what your key variables are. How do you then embed that into the way that you run your business in the shorter term?
Well, this is the great question, I suppose. I mean, we certainly found that companies seem very adept with scenario planning these days. More of them seem to be embarking on scenario planning than we would have imagined, in fact, as a result of the survey. But then we asked them how they saw those exercises, and opinions were really mixed. About a third said, yeah, we were able to use the thinking that we've developed in this way to right across our thinking on strategy. Others, and in some ways a majority of respondents said, look, it's a nice idea and it's really great to do it, but we have no idea what to do with the results. Yeah. So that's very much a mixed way of thinking. But I'm still encouraged by the idea that so many organisations are embarking on scenario planning, that ultimately it's going to have to become part of organisation thinking, and the thinking will become embedded through the process. In the report, we certainly point out a few ways in which companies could take scenario planning on board and make more use of it in their strategic thinking generally.
I was delighted that we could support the research, and it actually mirrors our focus on futures as well. We think that providing that long-term perspective, the horizon scanning, actually really brings something to particularly those senior decision makers. It's something they're particularly excited by and they see as very important to their correct decision making. They don't always have the time to do it themselves. So interesting that businesses more and more are getting into that scenario planning exercise. I mean, people like Shell, organisations like Shell have been doing this since the 70s, very famously, and really embedding it into the way that they run their business. I think that businesses that have that long-term strategy should be better insulated against risk. Is that what we're seeing?
You would certainly think so. I mean, we take a few case studies in the report, and one of the most interesting ones from our point of view was to look at the pharmaceutical sector, which has got a very, very long-term business model. We all know that drugs take a long time through development phase and a very risky period to get them to market. So you would expect that long-term risk planning would be something which would be quite intuitive and embedded throughout the process. To a degree it is, but also to a degree it's not. And it's partly because of the way the risk function has been structured, I suppose, throughout organisations generally. But we looked at Eli Lilly and Co., for example, which is doing something really interesting in the way that they're looking at long-term risk now. And they really are managing to embed it throughout the organisation through all aspects. Partly through the way they structure it. And this, I think, is crucial to looking at how long-term risk is managed within organisations. Well, your management could be centralised. The risk management side of things, in a way, has to be virtual, especially with a large multinational, and particularly with a large, complicated business model like pharma. You would have to have that very virtual structure, if you like. Seems to be working for Lilly, so interesting to see if any of their peers follow suit, I suppose. In
a survey that we've undertaken ourselves, we're looking actually at the level below that. So within the finance function, how are accountants do their day-to-day practice, either informally or formally, managing risk on a day-to-day basis. And it's that integration throughout the business that really brings dividends, I think. I guess there's a question for me is, what surprised you in the results?
Well, I think, again, the sort of number of companies embarking on scenario planning surprised us, and equally the number of companies who are quite openly admitting that we really don't know what to do with the results. That was a surprise.
There seemed to be an awful lot of people who'd like to do it but hadn't got round to it.
Exactly.
You'd question what's stopping them.
That's right, yeah. What is stopping them? I think, though, that it should be a food for thought for any companies who are or risk management consultants who are looking to get into this field, for example. It seems like there's a golden opportunity there to be able to talk up this process. So I'm looking forward to next year's research and seeing just how whether or not we'll see any progress in this area as well.
From your perspective, what do you think the C-suite can do to really begin to take more notice of what the strategic scenario planning is actually telling them?
Well, if you ask a risk manager, they'd say, of course, just put us on the board and everything will be fine. But it seems to be that, again, and this is something else we've asked them for many years now, is how often you're reporting to management and board. And it seems that reporting has become more frequent. You'd expect that in a volatile time like this, that the C-suite would insist on much more regular reporting. That definitely seems to be occurring. So I think as a first point, that's essential. But otherwise, it seems that there are sort of and in some industries this has been well established for many years, but there are more and more risk management committees being established within organisations to help to manage this. So I think that I see this almost undoubtedly we're going to watch this kind of ongoing trend.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, because I think at the moment there's a very strong view on the long-term issues and on risk generally, and it's something that we've noticed. Organisations are becoming much more focused on managing risk, identifying risk, being aware of the risks that they're open to. But that's natural after a crisis. The question will be, is this embedded in the long term? Yeah,
that's right. And of course, when you ask about companies planning even over the next couple of years, how much do they intend to invest in risk? That's sometimes not not quite as strong a finding as you would like. You do see a bit of hesitancy on behalf of respondents to say, well, we're going to invest heavily in the risk function. It just doesn't seem to occur that much.
What was the horizon that you found people were looking out to?
It was very mixed. We found, interestingly, a big difference between the horizon they have for strategic thinking and the distance they were looking at for risk thinking. There was a real mismatch there. For example, it seemed to be on average a sort of... if they were comfortable at looking at a 10-year horizon with strategy, they would only be prepared to look for 5 to 7 years ahead for risk. So there was that real discrepancy there, if you like.
Why the mismatch, do you think?
I don't know. I think because but I suppose we kick off the report with a quote from Niels Bohr, the Danish physicist, who it was something on the lines of it's hard to predict the future. It's just about impossible to predict the future, and no one really wants to go out on a limb, particularly I think in the times we're living in now. But what we're really saying in the report is that, look, yes, everyone knows you can't predict the future with absolute certainty, but what you do have to bear in mind is that there are scenarios and there are situations which you can have in mind and you can have throughout the organisation, which are definitely going to help you to bear in mind as you go forward over the next 5 to 10 years.
I think we're seeing some really systemic risks that are repeating, not only in the economic system, but natural disasters and so on in the insurance industry. It surprises me that so many organisations are not looking at the past to learn about the future. I think it's a really strong area for development. Where do you think C-suite, chief executives and those involved at the executive level need to place their future emphasis in order to be able to learn from this report, the findings?
Continuing down the scenario planning route is obviously a good one, but I think in trying to work out what's best for their organisation and make sure that there's a system in place which will continue after they're gone, if you like. Assuming that that even if they deny that the short-term thinking is endemic within the C-suite, there's still that fact that they may not be around for the next 10 to 15 years, and they really need to make sure that system is in place and the company can take care of itself.
Well, that's a long-term risk in its own right, isn't it? That succession planning for organisations is quite a tough one.
Absolutely.
Questioning who comes after the current chief executive is a difficult question to ask when the chief executives are around the table. Exactly.
But I think also just even having in your mind the various different scenarios that you might have. I mean, it's all very well to talk about going to emerging markets, and you can think about the population growth in that market over the next 10, 15 years. But do you also have in the back of your mind other scenarios which might occur within that market? And I think that's very much the preserve of the C-suite and board. You need to have that sort of structure to your thinking going forward as well. Provided it's there and in place and they're all just embedded in someone's mind, then of course things will look healthier in the future.
Inevitably with surveys and reports of this type, while it does provide some answers, it opens up more questions as well. It's a Pandora's box. Where do you think we should take this next?
What I always feel after we finish a piece of research like this, I think I wish I could drill down further into one industry or another. Why is financial services? They used to be. Why is scenario planning not such a part of the energy sector when, of course, Shell invented the term? Why,
peak oil around the corner and everything
exactly, else. That's right, yeah. And next year's research, I'm not really sure. I mean, in a way, one of the beauties of doing it in this way is that we can take a view 3 months out from the delivery of the report and say, well, what's hot and what's current. And I think the volatility of the business environment we're currently living in means that it's possible to do that and come up with some very interesting results. Ahead of this poll, for example, we did a very quick poll, which we presented to you, I guess, a while back now, where we just asked people to look ahead in the future and name their top risk over the coming 6 to 12 months. And this year, it was far and away the Eurozone breakup was forefront of people's minds. That was 6-7 months ago. So
I don't think that will have changed much.
No, I don't think it will have either. But it has changed a lot from the previous year, where it was a worry in Europe, for example. This year, it was a colossal worry for respondents in the Asia Pacific and in the US. So obviously, Europe's problem has become a global problem, and we've sort of seen that trend develop as well over the next little while. So again, I'm not going to crystal ball gaze about next year's research either. But
well, I look forward to working together with you.
And you.
We all look forward to seeing what's coming out of Economist Towers over the next few months as well. So good luck with your research.
Thank you very much, and great to talk to you.